Everything stinks of promethium. It sits in the back of your throat like sour cough syrup. You taste it in your teeth. When you wake, it's already there, woven into your spit. When you sleep, it shimmers through your dreams like fumes over a hot grate. We're told the air's filtered, that the chim scrubbers do their duty and the Emperor provides. But the only thing they provide is lung rot. Not that you complain. You don't live long enough down here to make complaining worth the breath. Shift starts with the clang of the Auspex bell, high-pitched, hollow, mechanical, like laughter buried in metal. That's 3 hours after lights out, though it's hard to tell. No windows, no sky, just lamps that flicker on when the overseers decide day begins. I share a cubicle with 6 others. Bunks stacked 3 high, foam laid over scrap metal sheets. You learn to sleep through coughing, praying, and the wet sounds of people dying quietly in their cots. Jano died last week, black sputum, purge blisters. They took him in the middle of the night, left his bedding, saves them the material. We file out, boots scraping against ferro grate floors, shoulders brushing walls slick with condensation and rust. It's always wet. The moisture hangs in the air until your skin mildews beneath your overalls. You itch constantly, but scratching gets you docked if the overseers see it. At the lift, I tap my ident plaque into the reader. It buzzes red. Again. I'm 3 rations short of clearance. The tech priest doesn't look up, just tilts his servo head slightly, then nods me through. Maybe he didn't notice, or maybe he's decided I'm not worth correcting anymore. The Omnicia works in mysterious tolerances. The lift descends 15 levels to Refinery Belt 9. That's where Station Theta 43 sits, rusting like everything else. I've been assigned to it for the last 6 years. Pipe inspection, filter cycling, vent loss recalibration. The sort of work no servitor can quite manage because it needs human improv. And fingers. For now. I passed 2 of them on the way in. Ex-persons. Still wear their old shift suits, only they've been cut to make room for implants. Blank eyes, metal-sheathed arms, backs sprouting data tines and tubing. One had a name once. I think it was Drell. Still walks with the same shoulder hunch. I nod as I pass. He doesn't notice. Or maybe he does, and just doesn't care anymore. Inside the plant, heat hits like a flamer on low burn. Everything roars. Pump engines churn, belts scream, and the shim still boils off in hissing clouds. We wear rebreathers, low-grade ones. You can smell through them, just enough to remind you what you're enduring. Hieronymus, the overseer, waits near the central console. He's more machine than man, though he keeps a flesh face stitched on under the rebreather mask. Some kind of piety, I think, or vanity. He blesses the cogitator with sacred unguents, black oil mixed with incense and some paste that smells like meat gone sour. We kneel as he chants. The Omnissiah maintains, the Omnissiah provides, the Omnissiah requires service. He waves a mechadendrite and sends us to our posts. That'll be 11 hours straight, 2 breaks if the flow pulse dips under regulation tolerance. If not, no pause. Work through lest the Emperor be disappointed. He's always watching, so we're told, though I've never seen anyone watching except the servo skulls. They hover by the ceiling, venting ducts, optics glowing red amid the steam. I climb down into the chim basin recess. Stark shadows cut across the metal from the warning strobes. My hands don't shake anymore. They used to, but you either learn quick or you stop showing up. Last guy who was slow, Than from line 3, he lagged behind the pressure curve. Blew a vent gasket, lost half his face. Came back 2 days later with the augment. Still drools when he shifts pressure seals. The metal is warm under my gloves. Condensation forms on the suit. Every bolt I turn, every gauge I read, I mutter the right. Blessed is the calibration. Holy is the psi vent. Sanctified be the manifold schema. Sometimes I don't know if I still believe it or if it's just reflex. Like breathing, like scratching. But reflex keeps you alive, and faith, well, it makes dying neat, contained, like another cog slotting out and replaced. Today, the shim flow is off. Uprig valves are bleeding black mist. I mark it on my data slate, ratchet the seal, and secure with a tomb lock clasp. I sheath the nozzle in wax. The rite demands it. Hieronymus expects it. The wax melts after an hour, but it satisfies the log cycle. My hands are heat slick and blackened. 3 of my fingers don't feel touch anymore. The med servo said it was rad blight last time. Gave me a solution to rub on. It smelled like burnt copper. Didn't feel like anything. Maybe that's the blessing. Lunch bell rings. 23 minutes. I retreat to the feeding alcove. We sit on upturned crates, pass out ration bricks, congealed blocks of protein slurry. Tastely like boiled oil and old meat, but it's dense. 3 bites and your stomach unclenches. Nara's sitting across from me. Thick scar across her neck from where a piping arm tore loose. She doesn't talk much. No one does. Not while eating. Words are expensive, even cheap words. She slides me half a brick. I raise a brow. She shrugs. Don't feel hungry, she says. I almost believe it, but her eyes say different. Still, I take it. Guilt doesn't feed you. That's another truth we've learned. Back to the line. Belt 3 is jammed, raw promethium collecting at the coupling vent. That's 2 minutes from a backflow spike. I radio in, but the channel returns static. Hieronymus is busy sanctifying a new coil. I override the lock and cut power to the valve. Technically, I'm not allowed. Only initiates of the cult mechanicus are authorized to breach flow seals unsupervised. But rules bend when molten death is imminent. I scrape off the slag, lash a binding coil, and snap the brace ring back into place. It holds. For now. Timer ticks down in red across my visor overlay. 9 hours, 17 minutes until cycle end. Time crawls like rust breach across a pipe skin. By end of shift, my back screams, knees lock up when I ascend to the decontam platform. Synth foam showers blast us with lye and dry gas. One man ahead of me doesn't move fast enough. His eyes catch it straight. He doesn't scream, just gags once. Later, I hear they demoted him to sump maintenance. That's 1 level above execution. Back at the lift, Hieronymus passes us in silence. His robes drip with coolant fluids, soaked from some esoteric rite. He moves without sound, gliding on servo supports. Eyes like polished augmetics. You look into them and see your face reflected, warped by glass and blessed disinterest. We ride the lift up in silence. No strength for chatter. No point. Tomorrow's shift will be the same. Same heat, same stink, same chanting and sealing and scraping tar from the under edges of pipes that have outlived cities. Still, I try not to think ahead. At the bunk level, I catch a message on the board. My name, scrawled in grease. Rations approved, +3. Family request fulfilled. That's something. Maybe the logistics script I filed last week finally processed. Maybe someone died and I took their turn. Doesn't matter. It means my sister eats tonight, down in Sector Tertius, where they've only got recycled air and rat starch. She's 12, works textile sorting, dreams of becoming a Hab scribe. Told me once she wanted to see Upspire daylight. I told her to focus on learning her Vox codes. Light burns if you're not born to it. In the dorm, someone's snoring already. I slide into my bunk. Boots off, belt unhooked, fingers raw, whole body aches. But I'm alive. Another day done, another cycle served. The Emperor protects. I close my eyes. Somewhere beneath the floor, The furnaces never stop. The factory pulses with a heartbeat not found in any living creature. I time my breath with the thump of the tanks, lull myself against the clatter of feeders and servitor treads, and I pray. Not like the manufactorum does, not with incantations or gilded script, just a thought, brief and simple. Please, let the filters hold tomorrow. Let the belt move clean. Let no one see me pause. Let the seal of my path remain untouched. Small prayers, quiet ones, the only kind that survive here. We'd been 8 shifts into the efficiency drive when the sirens began screaming again. Same tone, same pitch, same headache burrowing into the base of my skull. I'd figured it was just another burst pipeline or runaway Kim reaction. The refinery coughed up those every other day. But when the klaxon didn't cut off after the usual 30 seconds, people started exchanging glances. At least those of us left with functioning eyelids did. Grex was the first to speak, or snort rather. Said it was probably Sector 9 slacking off again, deadbeats hitting 84% throughput. I kept my mouth shut. It was always the ones yapping about other workers who ended up bolted to a loading crane, spark stripped and wired into compliance. Grex had good lungs for a place like this. He'd need them when they came for him. They always came eventually. The air was thicker than usual, like we were breathing liquefied rust. The Kim particulates clung to my skin under the rebreather straps, gummy and sweet. That false sugar sting meant the filters were late on their scrape cycle. I filed the complaint out of habit, even though I knew no one beyond Tech Priest Hieronymus would read it, and he hadn't acknowledged a maintenance form since the decade turned. We kept working. That's the rule. You hear sirens, you scrub the sludge harder, realign the feeder rails faster, recalibrate the venting gaskets with more reverence. A week-long drive meant shifts without end, rest rotations discarded like so many spent lungs. We were gifted a sacred extension of glory, said the bulletin. Praise the Omnissiah for the chance to serve. I puked behind the recycled tanks during break line 6, and only 2 of the servitors noticed. Neither intervened. On the 10th shift, Sector 9 went dark. It wasn't dramatic, no explosion, not at first. Just a long, low power flicker, like the lights caught a breath and then forgot what they were for. Then came the glow, not from overheads, but the strobes of lasfire and the orange flicker of refinery flame leaking from shuttered blast gates. We saw it through the Grielle vents, plasma shadows against soot fog, shapes writhing, sputtering in thermal waves. Then the real sirens came. Not the warning ones from the manufactorum's upper logic cog, but the Arbites' shriek thieves, those pitch-cutting vox wails tuned to penetrate even chemical nerve damage. We dropped our tools before we even knew it. That's the thing about it. Your hands know to freeze before your brain even asks a question. I must have stood there 5 whole minutes beside a jammed strippage tray, watching the smoke billow down shaft. Everyone did, even Grex. Especially Grex. The Arbites came accompanied by a fide charge statement that scrolled in glowing red above the main bulkhead. Article 387, Subdirective 12, Dereliction from Throne-mandated labor. The digits pulsed in time with the boots, metallic echoes drawing closer. 12 of them. Black armor laced with ceramite trim, visors opaque, battens glowing with shock field halos. They moved like one-bladed intention, all purpose and no pause. They didn't speak, not at first. The first round of screaming started when they reached the pack clerks near the descent elevator. I didn't see what prompted it, just the heavy crack of discharge and a body on the floor, twitching like a squigfish scraped too fast. Then one of the Arbites grabbed the biometric tag from the body's neck and held it up to the cogitator shrine by the infra-terminal. The machine bleeped, green, then orange, then red. Subunit C. Throughput delinquent. Sentence exemplary voiding. I didn't even notice I'd stopped breathing until the echo swallowed the words. The dozen enforcers moved in a perfect wedge through the subunit's bunk row. All we could see were flurries of movement, white sputters of light. Some of it was last fire. Most wasn't. When they pulled the last one from under a half-crushed inventory stacker, she was begging. Not to them. To the Emperor. I must have counted it out in my head, same way I calibrate the pressure feeds. 2 mouth movements. Please, protect! Then one of the Arbites pulped her jaw with a single blow. The other 11 didn't even twitch. They left the bodies where they fell. A few servitors wheeled up behind them minutes later, dragging the corpses by ankle clamps toward the reclaim crushers. Nutrient processing pretends it's efficient. Really, it's just convenient. Grex wouldn't stop mumbling. He was reciting the litany of efficiency under his breath, fingers tracing the ink-rot tattoo on his wrist like it might light up and protect him. 3rd clause, 12th verse. Labor is its own deliverance. He kept skipping words, though. Not that it mattered. No one was listening. I told him to shut up, tried to make it sound calm, did a better job than I expected. The Arbites exited without fanfare. No pronouncements, no further decrees. The silence left after them felt like someone had drained the noise from the air instead of the other way around. We worked. The pipeline still hissed. The conveyor arms still jolted. The chim spill valves still needed bleeding before vapor density reached suffocation thresholds. We cleaned, calibrated, and prayed. At least, I did. Same prayer I'd done since daystroke 19. Emperor, Holy Father of Man, accept my labor as proof of devotion and grant my sister her next ration queue. Though I didn't say it quite as loud this time. Efficiency spiked, they later said. 127% over predictive baseline. We got a new overseer the next shift rotation, a mech-seer from the fleshless tier. His faceplate had more blinking glyphs than vocal ports. He gave us 24 words total, then locked himself in the control coil and let servitors announce break intervals. They didn't actually give breaks, just announcements of them. A small mercy. You could pretend. By the 12th shift, I noticed the air had turned green. Not metaphorical green either. A pale viridian drift had settled in layer Gamma's upper canopy. Meant the chim burns were bypassing purifier routes again. Probably sacrificial seals weren't holding. Probably no one left alive high enough in the registry pipeline to flag it. I logged a complaint, again. Marked it as urgent chronic. I watched 3 workers collapse on the fluidation deck across from us. One just froze mid-pump realignment and toppled sideways into the cooling sump. No splash. The slog was too thick. Bubbles came 20 seconds later, then nothing. No one stopped the rig. I filed another complaint, then activated the emergency override countermark. Nothing happened. Grex didn't show up next shift. No announcement, no replacement. Just a smaller task quota, delivered with the same number of lit anodes blinking at my stall. My hands bled from the grinding plates. I wrapped them in old shrine parchment stored behind the cogitator banks. It stuck fast to the wounds, so that was something. By the end of the 2nd week, they sealed off Sector 9. Bulkhead doors fused, ductwork rerouted. The path we took for breakline circuit now terminated in a shear weld and a comforting picked sign, protected for your benefit. I ran into one of the corpse grinder teams 3 days after that. Their cart was heavier than usual, hydraulic lift straining in its servos. One of them had a visible ocular socket not fully replaced. Our eyes met for half a second, a heavy moment. He looked past me the moment after. Later, I found Grex's ident tag nestled in the floor grating, burnt edges, still smelled of recaf oil and burnt lung shock meds. I slid it under my chest plate, out of sight. Not sure why. Death was currency here. I guess I didn't want him spent yet. It wasn't that I doubted the Emperor. Not really. I knew the price of order. I'd memorized the Psalms of Flame since I was tall enough to reach a terminal. I'd watched saints be crucified in blood-steam murals on the Hab Wall boon screens. I'd seen the Emperor's light sear heresy clear off of rebel fiefdoms in the off-cycle broadcasts. But something about the way her head hit the steel, the woman from the bunk row, teeth gone, eyes open like she'd forgotten what blinking was for, it wouldn't leave. I didn't even know her name. Probably should have. I told myself justice had a cost. That measured failure must result in measured consequence, that the Emperor, blessed be his golden divinity, loved even the lazy if they died rightly. But even as I scraped grease from intake valves and mumbled devotional lines from the Book of Tasks, I caught myself wondering, what was the measure? Where was the line between delay and death, between overworked and over? The true star hour chimed 4 tones above us, echoing through the smoke charge vents like a sermon played through cloth. I whispered the prayer for the faithful dead. My lips moved, but my chest stayed heavy, like the words weren't going anywhere. A servitor rolled near, sprayers extended, and blessed my tools with sacred oil. Just 2 drops. Meant for luck, I think. I flicked one toward the votive circuit on the main gauge control and let the other drip down my knuckles. The machines didn't care. They just kept moving. So did I. The gray market stank of burnt solvent and sump oil. Not the worst smell in the hive, but it clung. Got under the skin, into the clothes, hung around like a sickness, waiting for your lungs to give out. I kept my scarf over my mouth, though that was about as effective as praying against rad blight. Still, I figured it was better than nothing, particularly near the stalls where the Kim waste tanks vented directly into the open air, such as it was. The tubing was supposed to be allocation 6 Delta, promethium grade, 10 meters coiled. Mechanicus techs claimed we had enough in the substack, but they always said that. I'd sent a requisition through, signed off under Sub-Technician Brawl's seal, and that was 3 shifts ago. We still hadn't received a bolt of polyblessed tubing, and the chim extruders were straining loud enough to wake a corpse grinder. So Brawl gave me an instruction that wasn't quite a command. Check the gray lanes, maybe barter something, maybe don't say where I got it. He let me take a ration chit, not his, of course. I passed under an old banner rig post in the outer gantries, the kind that used to hoist house slogans during the Sump riots. What hung now was a half-burned strip of silk bearing House Orlok's gang brand. Skulls etched into wheels, faded, threadbare. Someone had smeared a crude red triangle over it, paint so fresh it still glistened. Either defiance or stupidity, possibly both. The market itself squatted like a cancer between duck stacks, wrapped in scavenged plasteel and bone plate. Stalls leaned against each other for support, each one rigged with scrap cogitators and jury-rigged glow bulbs that flickered in confusion at passing power fluxes. There was a buzz in the air, not sound, pressure, like the hive metal itself held its breath. I found a stall run by a hunched man with too many fingers doing twitchy things near a pile of tubing. Some of it was regulation grade, or at least convincing forgeries. He tried to tell me the red striping meant it was sanctified by Martian rites. I pointed to where the paint was flaking off. He laughed. I didn't. I got the right length in exchange for the chit and a few blunt threats about me knowing a junior mechanicus acolyte with 2 augmetic arms and a temper. That wasn't a lie. CERN had a temper, just not for anything useful. As I turned to leave, a hand brushed mine. Cold fingers, deliberate movement. I didn't like that. He stood close, too close for anything but a mugging or a message. Didn't look like either. Wrapped in tan rags designed to pass as nothing, with goggles fogged from his breath. Between the filters, his voice thinned out like rusted chim gas. They said the Emperor sees all, but not the depths. I stared at him, angled slightly to keep my wrench at hand. Normal response would have been to report him, recite creed breaches. Instead, something in his voice, no urgency, just fact, like he was mentioning the cold. I didn't answer, but I didn't leave either. They said no one comes back from vent sector 12, he continued, more to the air than to me. But there's a light down there, a warmth. You should see it. He slipped a slip of plasteel into my palm, and his steps vanished into the crowd like he dissolved into the smog. The plasteel had a mark etched in, 4 arms curved around a star, worn smooth by handling. I should have thrown it away. I didn't. I kept it tucked behind the button seam of my coverall and walked. Not fast, not slow. Just like any other worker, drone doing his errand, his duty, his pointless crawl through the rot. My shift had long since passed. Brawl wouldn't care. Tubing meant the line ran. The line running meant someone above didn't have to explain something to someone higher. Instead of heading directly back, I veered left through a siphon corridor that led down past the fungal drying pits. The air turned moist and sour. Spore bait. I covered my mouth again. It didn't take long to find them. A gathering. Not a crowd. Not quite. Workers leaned close to lamp lines that had no power, murmuring in 3s and 4s. One, a woman with the leathered skin of someone who cleaned sump filters by hand, stood near a vent pipe reciting something soft. It wasn't high Gothic, but it wasn't factory chant either. Someone passed a canister of fluid from hand to hand. They drank solemnly, not hungrily, a ritual, not relief. No insignias, no chains, no banners, but they looked at each other with a kind of reverence I'd never seen outside the ecclesiarchy shrines. Only in those shrines, the eyes always felt blank. Here, they glowed, despite the darkness. A figure appeared from the shadows. He wore a mask, smooth, unset with lenses or grill, featureless as boiled bone. Cloth over his limbs, stained but clean by Underhive standards. My first assumption was Ganger, then preacher, then something else, something older. When he spoke, it wasn't raised, but we all heard. "We are the forgotten hands," he said, "the silenced mouths, the broken backs." Some of them nodded. I didn't move. "They call us failures," he went on, "yet we built the Hive. They say we are impure, but every child born beneath these towers knows the truth. It is they above who corrupt the world with their lies." That last word, lies, struck like a hammer. Not because it was loud, but because it wasn't. It just landed. Final, certain. A hand took mine again. Not the messenger from earlier, this one smaller, calloused. A young man, maybe 16, missing 2 fingers. He pressed his forehead to mine briefly, said nothing, didn't have to. The speaker raised something metal, an old servo skull, decommissioned, all vox parts removed. He held it like a relic, like it meant more than 100 sermons. "We take no praise from the golden corpse above," he said. "Our promise comes not from stars or holy writs." He turned the skull, revealing the symbol carved beneath it. The same as the plasteel, the 4-armed star. "Our Father below sees us, loves us, will lift us." The air tightened. Pheromones? Maybe. It smelled like incense mixed with sweat and oil, but undertones I couldn't place. Sweet and wrong, in a way that almost felt right if I didn't think too hard about it. I stayed longer than I meant to. Hours, maybe half a shift. No one asked me for anything, no questions, no pledges, just presence. When I finally left, my hands were coated in a fine dust. Ash from an incense burner passed silently through the crowd. It wasn't fragrant, it smelled like burned meat, but I kept it on my skin. Back in the refinery, Brawl scowled as I handed over the tubing and mumbled about market delays. He didn't press, too tired, same as the rest of us. Just another line run complete, another task offloaded, another breath above the rot. For now. Later that cycle, when the machines were sleeping and the hum of distant warp chant no longer blanketed my skull, I turned the plasteel marker over in my palm. Just once. I told myself it was curiosity, a worker like any other, sifting through the refuse. But when I closed my eyes, I thought of that speaker and the way he made the term "forgotten" feel holy, and I didn't dream of the Emperor that night. The light from my Auspex lamp flickered the moment I passed into the lower access port beneath Hab Sector 19 Gamma. I banged it against a pipe out of habit, twice a third time. But the flicker was steady now, not failing. A low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat set to static. I stared at it too long before moving on. The air was thicker here. I could smell oxidized coolant and the ghost of old promethium spills beneath the rot fungus and rat urine. Somewhere above, the Kim stacks would be belching smoke, the forges spitting heat into the Hive's veins. But down here, in this forgotten network of subducted conduits and null servitor caches, it was all silence. They'd assigned me a solo max coupling repair. Old cogitator logs said it hadn't been serviced in 97 years, probably a clerical error. Or not. There's always a certain logic to Imperial records. If it's ancient and dangerous, best send one man with a wrench. I adjusted the breather on my mask. It whined and clicked, drawing in air too faint to properly scrub. My chest felt tight, reeked of something sweetly wrong, like incense left too long in a corpse vault. The kind of smell you want to forget but never do. The corridor narrowed into a resin-scabbed ventilation shaft. Whatever sealed the edges wasn't made from standard Hive construction. It felt organic. I reached out, scraped my gloved finger along the wall. It came away with a faint shimmer. Not oil, not promethium, not anything mechanicus. Something greenish and tacky, like phlegm left to dry. I almost turned back then. Almost. But target coordinates were still pinging from the Auspex. A locked rust gate 30 meters down, so I climbed through, boots scraping on transmission line coils so choked in dust they looked like veins beneath skin. From the corner of my eye, I kept seeing movement that wasn't there. The kind that waits just long enough for you to look away. The gate lay open. Not ajar. Open. Not forced or rusted through. Just welcoming. That was wrong. I knew it. The Omnissiah does not leave systems unlocked lightly. I paused, whispered the litany of access, tapped my forehead with the sacred data spike I kept tied around my collar. It made me feel better for nearly 2 full breaths. Beyond the gate, the structure changed. Girders gave way to something that looked like bone-clouded plaster. The walls had marks etched into them, not graffiti. Symbols pressed into surface like teeth biting flesh. I didn't recognize the script, probably didn't want to. Still no coupling node. I should have reported back. I should have climbed back to the promethium vents, told Overseer Brannick the route was compromised, but the Auspex blinked again. New signal. Strong. Closer. Amid the signal was a low tone frequency, almost musical, behind the static. My fingers tingled. Electrosensory feedback, maybe, or something older humming through the metal. The corridor opened into what I first assumed was a collapsed maintenance station. Broken catwalks, a collapsed crane arm, half a dozen ruined Vox relays sprawled like broken worms. But it had been cleaned recently. Dust swept into careful circles. Hololith projectors mounted on tripods chopped from scrap rigging worked in tandem, flickering images toward the far bulkhead. They showed the Emperor. For a moment, then the image twisted. Same throne, same robes, but the face softened into something inhuman. Elongated, eyes too large, a crown of limbs blooming behind his head. I stood very still. My legs didn't want to obey. My hand went to my chest, pressing instinctively over the small Auspex bead I'd worn since ordination as a junior servitor tech. The bead was warm. Too warm. There were figures beneath the hollow projectors. 4 or 5, kneeling. One stood. He wore a rebreather harness pieced together from waist loom tubes, a mask with insect eyes, and his arms moved. Not 2 but 4, each precise with a practitioner's grace. He looked at me. No words were spoken, not yet. His head tilted slightly, and he gestured toward the holograms, as if I were expected, or late. My boots didn't move, my head didn't nod. I simply watched as the imagery shifted again. Not religious now, but anatomical. Diagrams of hive lungs blackened by soot, spinal columns bent under labor weights, masses of humans, faceless and rotting in endless lines. Then flashes, workers lifting their heads together, four-limbed silhouettes behind them in light, and the words written in red letters, big as banners, "No more silence, no more chains." It scared me. Not because it was heresy. That was too big a word for the moment. It scared me because I understood it. The figure approached, slow steps, gentle. He reached out, touched the exposed stanchion beside me. His gloved fingertips scraped a pattern into the grime. A symbol, a curved crescent, 2 points splitting like jaws. He didn't speak, just tapped it twice and walked backward into the hollow glow. I realized then that the Auspex wasn't picking up a mechanical beacon. It was reacting to a warp in the electromagnetic field, all around this chamber. This wasn't a power failure. This wasn't decay. This place had been restructured, carved inward like a cathedral built from rust, bone, and ritual. I wanted to run, couldn't. My thoughts raced while my feet stayed bolted in place. He was still there, waiting, not urging, just waiting. So I turned and walked away. Slowly. Not panicked, not fleeing. But I made the mistake of looking back before I cleared the rust gate again. Behind them, deeper in the dark, something stirred, something massive, moving like breath under buried stone. Back in the upper ducts, past the junction I wasn't supposed to enter, I finally bent over and threw up inside my respirator. The bile mixed with promethium soot and clogged the filter. Couldn't breathe for a full minute. That was my punishment, I guess. Or maybe just physics. I reported the mag coupling suicide failed, said the node had completely corroded into slag with no stable supports. Overseer Brannick signed off. Didn't ask for diagnostic logs. Didn't care. Another worker had tried the route last week, he told me. He never returned. I didn't say anything. I tried not to think about what was now inside my head, the rhythms of those images still playing behind my eyes when I closed them. A week passed, then 2, and somehow maintenance cycles kept getting routed lower. Kim filters redirected downward, power coils drawing from deeper caches. Today someone left a scrap of parchment in my locker. It was oily and soot-grimed, but the edges were clean-cut. The same symbol, curved crescent, split points, just barely distinguishable. Nothing written, just the mark. I burned it, flame sputtering from a sump lighter until all that was left was blacked paper dribbling ash into my palm. Was that my defiance? Or proof it had reached me? I still perform the rites. I still whisper the litanies. I still call upon the omniscia when the chain seize or the servitors glitch. That hasn't changed, but I see the shape of things now. My faith is a machine, yes, efficient, strong, cold. But the thing I glimpsed beneath the manufactorum, that was warm, that was alive. It terrifies me how much I crave the warmth. The delay in the power cycle was exactly 17 seconds. I know because I counted each one in my head while I knelt in the sludge, slipping the key line into the conduit port like I'd done 100 times before. The seal hissed. The panel flickered green. I stood, wiped my glove on my coat, and felt the usual pressure in my chest absolve itself. That was it. The coupling was live. Nothing unusual. No alarms. I didn't know what the key was for. Not really. Just that it came wrapped in synth cloth, handed off in the dark corner outside recaf storage by an older man with one eye stitched shut and fingers missing down the middle. He said the tech priest needed new codes, that it came from Hieronymus himself. The lie was sloppy, but that didn't matter. I needed meal tokens. He had 5. I clutched those wafers of pressed protein like they were blessings from the throne. They were for Mara. She hadn't stood tall in near a week. her ribs like pipes under her skin, the skin itself turning grey. She never complained, just stared through the Hab's ceiling lights as if trying to remember stars. I told her the Emperor saw her, even there on the floor. I said it with purpose, as if I still believed it at the time. Hours later, the sirens triggered. Fire klaxons this time. Deep-pitched and wet, like something drowning in its own metal lungs. I was halfway across the conveyor spine, hauling waste coils out toward reclamation, when the lights went red. A bloom of smoke peeled up from Section Theta's vent tower, licking the ceiling like angry ink. A minute passed. Then 3. Then came the scream. It wasn't loud, not over the air saws and the cogitator churning, but it carried. High and short, like someone realizing the floor had given way under them and grasping at air that didn't care. The sound stopped abruptly. I don't know who it was. Even now, I try not to guess. Sprinkler systems kicked in late. Liquid hissed down, greasy and warm. Someone, maybe Juno, maybe not, shouted about propellant valves. Then I heard the explosion. Not a collapse, not that full raw detonation that flattens things. This one was tailored, tactical, designed to shred stability beams but leave the shell intact. Whoever placed them had known exactly what they were doing. I told myself the fire wouldn't reach our Hab. We were off-axis by at least 200 meters and lined in tincrete. The heat wouldn't pass the sealant. That's what I thought. When I reached the Hab level, I saw the corridor blown out. Steel twisted back like petals on a corpse rose. The air still shimmered, if you could call it air, more a haze of carbon and sour vapor. No enforcer barriers, no med servitors, just bodies strewn like discarded gear. I found her hands first, curled under a sump pipe, little fingers caked with dark soot, then the rest, or what I could recognize. Her eyes were open. I don't know if that was better or worse. I sat beside her for a while, at least 5 cycles. Flakes of ash settled around us like artificial snow, melting where they landed. I didn't cry, not right then. My face just didn't move. Heat had crept into my boots. Later, when I peeled them off, the skin on both heels came off with them. No one came. Not a single authority. Not the Mechanicus, not the Enforcers, not even a corpse grinder to process the dead. The elevators had shut down 6 levels above. I passed 3 Ganger patrols, didn't even look up from the body. They ignored me. The cult came later, not with weapons, not with biologicals or divining rights of old blood, just food. One of them, I can't even remember now if it was the masked one or someone shorter, left half a loaf of vat bread and a flask sealed with wax beside me. I didn't look up. My hand found the food. I bit it without thinking. First food in, I don't know, a full day, maybe more. They didn't say a word, just waited. Eventually, when I stood, my knees creaked like rusting joints. I carried Mara's corpse to the old maintenance shaft behind Habstack 42. I set her down on a pile of insulation wrap and clasped my hands. No prayer came. My mouth moved for one. My tongue scraped at syllables I'd long since memorized, but the words fell apart between my teeth. She had always loved the stories. The ones I told her about light and sky, about prayers and Saint Sarah's flaming sword cutting down the impure. At the end of every story, the Emperor's light came and fixed the world. I almost told her another one, kneeling in that shaft. Couldn't bring myself to lie again. I joined the cult later that evening. They called it the New Rebirth. Said the old way had fed us into machines that never gave birth to anything but demand. That we were cogs in a false god's engine. That the true Father wanted us to live, not lick steel and call it grace. The masked speaker touched my burn-scarred shoulder and said, "No one dies in his arms unnoticed." I nodded, because the alternative was falling over. I told them about the key. They weren't surprised, said it did exactly what it was supposed to. cut pressure safety to the secondary lines. That's all it took for half the lower refinery block to ignite. 24 overseers, 400 workers, 64 Habs, 1 Mara. I didn't scream or strike, though I should have. Someone said it was necessary. That purging fire opened paths. We all had losses. One woman had lost her 3 children inside cargo lift 7. No one could have known it had welcomed that much pressure. She grieved louder than I did. If she hadn't, maybe I would have. I stayed silent, and silence, as it turned out, was all they needed from me. They didn't ask for blood. Not yet. Just silence, sweat, and attendance. I kept low after that, working odd tunnels, patching junction cables, replacing glow prisms in the dark. The others said I was useful, said I still smelled like the Imperium, and that's what they needed to pass unnoticed a while longer. But something cracked the next time I stood in the manufactorum's upper gallery. Ash still clung to the railings. Even 3 cycles later, it reeked. Burnt lubricant, melted electronics, skin. I passed a data panel that was half exposed, blistered from the heat. Someone, one of the old rights minders maybe, or dumb luck, had left a tiny votive charm still dangling from the scorched input jack. It was bent down at a slant, half slag and blackened with soot. But I knew it. An aquila, right side clipped off. I reached for it without thinking and paused. My hand hovered, then drew back. What was I touching it for? Who was I asking? A part of me still whispered that there had been order, that the Emperor hadn't meant for this, that perhaps the machine god had been tricked, or the Omniseer had closed its many eyes. But that voice was faint now, like a vent fan 4 levels away, spinning just slow enough to miss. Later, when they handed me the next object, a code relay, simple brass and wire wrapped in a skin of synth leather, I didn't hesitate. No questions, no small talk, just nodded and took it. I didn't ask what it did. Maybe I didn't want to know. Maybe I already did. That's the funny thing about belief. It doesn't end. It just changes shape. One day you're kneeling before the Emperor, asking him to keep your sister's lungs clean. The next, you're handing micro keys to revolutionaries while ignoring the way their eyes glint and flicker light too wide, too knowing. They keep calling it the new promise. I stopped asking what the old one was. The hatch groaned behind me as it locked, the lever hissing with stale pressure. I crouched there for a moment, one knee sunk in congealed lubricant, chest tight from the climb, lungs chewing on rusted air. The shaft was no wider than a corpse box, lined with dented mesh wire and coils that buzzed faintly in the static of the Hive's failing hum. My knuckles were raw again. The screws on the lowest access grill always flaked back their oxidation into your skin. Each time it felt like the pipe itself tried to chew on me, one bolt turn at a time. They told me we were the voice now, not the new promise. They didn't call it that anymore. Something about the name changed once blood had been spilled. We were no longer waiting for release. We were the ones breaking the doors open. That was what Vex had said to me 2 nights back, his second mouth grinning wide beneath the breathing shroud. I asked which doors he meant. He didn't answer, but handed me the sliver-etched data wafer with trembling hands. Fat lot of good silence did. Barely an hour passed before the sub-level trembled from blast charges. Someone had lost patience. Someone else had chosen the wrong moment to fetch synth meal. The spires above didn't care. I imagined a clerk in the administratum drawing a thin red line across a map, encoding a district for asset negation. They said the Arbites were on the march again. Didn't see them much anymore. Too high above the ash for their armor to gather soot now. The enforcers, though, they came in packs. Gangers tagged with House Helmauer's iron dyed in alleys at dusk, but more kept arriving. For every checkpoint we broke, 2 more rose behind it. Still, word had to move. Someone had to thread the message through the ducts and crawl spaces and electrified crawlways that mapped the bowels of the manufactorum like artery to heart. So again, it was me. No one remembered I once cleaned promethium filters. No one left to remember. Now they called me Runner, though I still answered to Jarek backward in my head, like a private joke I'd never tell. The wafer buzzed twice against my palm. Time to move. Up the shaft, 20 rungs, turn left at the flickering servo socket. Never right, never toward the rot pit. A sump beast made its home there. We'd named it Mercy. Humor, I suppose. It only killed when it got hungry. I passed by the melt-scarred husk of what used to be Supply Node 6 Gamma. The walls still stank of burnt flesh. Old flame units had washed through the floor here last week, courtesy of some overzealous PDF troopers. Rumor had it the Cadians had landed a full regiment up Spire. Nothing official, of course, but the Vox picked up strange static at night now. Human shapes talking too fast, enunciating like script readers doped on rage. I squeezed through the bent bulkhead into Duct 9. Lettering sprayed on the wall in yellow sludge. He watches with 4 eyes. Someone had drawn a crude image beside it. Vex's doing, probably. He claimed it was a sign of awakening. To me, it looked like a skull wearing a child's drawing of a crown. But then again, Vex saw things differently now. We all did. Drink enough spores from the incense vats, and your eyes adjusted. The meeting point was under the old relay array. I arrived wheezing, ribs twitching, spine sore from 3 days without sleep. They were already waiting, silhouettes in that soft void glow that came when the generators flirted with collapse. A girl offered me recycled water from a blood-stained flask. Her skin was pale, eyes filmy. Her voice, "You made it." Simple words, they meant everything. One of the techs took the wafer and slotted it into a narrow cogitator reed. The screen blinked. Phase Ember approved. Begin distribution. I leaned against a collapsed servitor frame while the others whispered. I didn't ask what Phase Ember was. I'd carried acid pods before, once even a skinfold of embryonic fluid that stank for hours and made my teeth itch. Everything we passed carried purpose. None of it bore explanation. Outside, the hive growled again. The lights flickered red. Air shifted like it had lungs of its own. A boom echoed from the far end of the shaft, muffled but close. A wall breach, maybe. One of the masked heralds stepped forward. She wore half a Mechanicus faceplate and the glint of engine oil in her hair. Her voice rasped tin through the Vox unit. "The time of crawling ends," she said. "We stand now." Nobody cheered. We weren't that kind of cult. No rousing chants, no drums, just quiet nods and the rustle of movement. They started fanning out, each one taking a new tunnel, a new message, a dose of spores clutched tight in blood wraps. I stayed behind for a few minutes. Didn't move, didn't speak. Just watched the eyes of the tech priest's half-melted face twitch on the corpse altar someone had erected in the corner. Its tongue was gone. Maybe that's why it didn't scream anymore. When I did move, it was slow. My legs shook. Part of me wanted to lie down on the warm rust and sleep for 5 years, maybe longer. But I knew where they'd find me. Knew what they'd do with my body. Nutrient recycling, if lucky. The pit, if not. Back through the tunnel, over the mesh bridge. Picking my way around old landmines that had long since fused to the floor. I passed an old PIC transmission hub, power flickering on a loop. A woman's face flickered on the screen. Half Emperor, half something else. Her voice was static singing. "He knows you. Even if he forgets all others, he knows you." I didn't stop to pray. The route changed. We never went the same way twice. Paranoia, maybe, or doctrine. We were taught to move like liquids. No pattern, no footprint. Sometimes I thought that the tunnels started whispering when you walked through them too much. Once I swore the walls bent in a little when I passed. My drop-off wasn't far, and the message I carried wasn't words. Just a square of meat thread cloth twisted in on itself. Vex told me that was all it would take now. The signal was embedded in the smell. I made the pass beneath the old gallows crank above Subforge 17. The contact was a child no older than 9, one eye gone, the other lidless and glazed with something purple. She whispered, "Glory in rebirth," and skipped off before I could make sense of the sentence. I leaned against a crack-lined steam pipe, wondering what rebirth looked like if it required this much blood. I thought of my sister again. Her name wouldn't hold still in my memory. I have to say it out loud sometimes just to keep it ranged. Mira. That was it. Mira. She'd have hated this place. Hated what it turned me into. Then again, she'd been the one to teach me how to keep silent when screaming helped nothing. Suppose that's the same thing now. My legs carried me to the old repair strata, where once we changed thermo baffles and cytoplasm tubes for the refinery. Now the place was lit only by the glow from burning air vents. A group of the faith gathered there, faces smeared with oil and broken data chips hanging from their wrists like rosaries. They spoke in unison. Something about the convergence. I didn't join them. I sat on a girder beam and stared down into the shaft, where the fires of the uprising still smoldered, painting the factories red and black. The smoke curled like fingers reaching for heaven, or maybe just choking the sky so we'd never see one again. They said the Imperium wouldn't reach us. They said the flame won't climb down this far, but I'd seen the pictures. New scars carved into maps by promethium floods. I'd watched a man dissolve in front of me last shift. No gunfire, no screaming, just fire and silence. Vex passed me a vial when he walked by. Told me to drink if I wanted to see clearly. I held on to it, fingers clenched hard. I might. Not yet. Not tonight. Somewhere above, maybe 20 levels up, I heard the howl of engines descending. Drop chutes, maybe Valkyries, maybe worse. We were still the voice, still the breath between silence, but the ears listening above. Those ears were hungry, listening not to understand, listening to crush. So I moved. Slid back into the dark with the message delivered, chest light with terror. The tunnels no longer whispered, they were singing. The air shimmered with heat. Not the filmy humidity we're used to, that greasy wetness that makes your lungs feel like waterlogged filters, but dry, radiant furnace heat. The kind that peels paint off metal and curls the edges of your boots before the soles start melting. It came up from below, through the hab vents and maintenance tunnels, creeping ahead of the guard like a herald with a flamethrower in its throat. Promethium kissed everything. I watched from the shell of a recycler tower as fire took level 812. The gantry lines went first, just flash and smoke and screaming. Then the crowd. The guard didn't ask questions, didn't broadcast warnings. The vox horns just repeated a looped hymn to St. Praxidia, something about blessed cinders and holy ruin. She burned traitors with joy in her heart. The joy was contagious, apparently. Arbites had pinned the perimeter days ago, shot anything that moved with those boxy suppressor cannons. Enforcers quit the lower stacks the moment the guard hoisted their banners. Just left us to it. Like rats too diseased for even the pest controller to touch. We thought the cult would hold them, that the new promise would bloom into some kind of future in all this fire. That was before we saw what laser guns do to human bodies. Before the first hellhound snarled its way through the corrosion ducts and belched death into the gullet of our makeshift shrine. I ran messages, breathed fumes, listened to people die across thin walls. I memorized the screams. Eventually, they all just sounded like the machine alarms that used to tell us oxygen was low or shim pressure had dropped below safe. Past a certain point, everything screams the same. They found Dregra under the furnace columns, her arms burned into the stone, like she was trying to hold up the manufactorum's corpse. I'd followed her voice through 6 corridors packed with smoke. She'd been preaching hope. By the time I got there, All that was left was the smear of her robes and teeth fused into the metal grill. The Patriarch, they called him that, though we never saw his face, didn't give sermons anymore. No more convocation in the algae bays. He was gone, or deeper, or saving himself. Didn't matter which. We kept calling him Father, but it started to feel hollow. He'd promised ascension, evolution, freedom. Now half the brothers and sisters just wanted breathable air, or water not laced with coagulant, or to sleep without dreaming of torches. I tried to pray again, tried to find the old words. Listening to ecclesiarch hymns on repeat from the vox horns seeped something into my skin. Not belief, just familiarity. It was like smelling oil and soot and thinking, home. Not because it's good, just because it's always there. The guard pushed up through the canal locks next, room by room. Burn first doctrine. They didn't breach. They dissolved. Every contact they made ended in scorched bones and charcoal screams. Deployment recorders floated behind them, servo skulls with Auspex lenses humming and twitching, war paint of dried blood. I watched one hover over a child's melted toy, lens rotating in mechanical curiosity. Maybe it tagged it for the post-conflict report. Item: civilian artifact, status, neutralized, threat rating, class null. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Just a dry hitch at the back of my throat, like someone squeezing a bellows with no air left in it. By the time they reached Sector L11, we were already ghosts. I hadn't eaten in 4 days. Just stale reclaim water and a handful of nutrient paste that tasted like metal scraped off a dead servitor's tongue. My back still hurt from the last drop I made, lugging a data slab through ventways that hadn't been crawled since the Great Upheaval. Message never got delivered. The recipient was already slag. I tried to help a boy up from a pile of wreckage. It wasn't rubble, it was corpses, but his fingers slipped from mine. Not because I dropped him. He just didn't have skin anymore. Just glistening, cooked meat. He wasn't heavy. I still couldn't carry him. I found Hectra hiding near the ruins of the third purification plant. She'd tattooed the four-armed symbol across her chest in coolant oil and her own blood, shaking from the fumes. Her mouth moved like she was humming, but the only sound coming out was wet breath. She let me sit beside her. We didn't talk, just watched mushrooms of flame ripple through the levels above. She died coughing up chunks of lung, red and foamed and clotted with soot. I didn't close her eyes. Felt too much like theater, like lying to her about where she was. Let her stare at the cracked ceiling and what little sky we ever got to see, even if it was just rust-colored light bouncing off smoke. I carried on alone, tried to find more messages to run, more orders to obey. Mechanical reflex, like a servitor without the courtesy of a cogitator brain scrub, just habit stitched to bone and regret. The guards started sealing hatches behind them, permanent welds, shutdowns locked with blessed script marked in made blood. I doubled back once and found my return path slagged into a curtain of blistered metal. No warning, no way through. They weren't taking prisoners, just redesigning the map with fire. During one purge cycle, I think they gassed an entire hab block. I never saw it. Just heard the hiss through the wall and then quiet. Beautiful, total quiet. For hours after, the smoke drifted soft, like it had nowhere urgent to be. Eventually, I stopped seeing faces I knew. No more cellmates, no more comrades. Just scorch marks in the shape of dreams and voices that lived in echoes. I crawled into one of the old access junctions beneath the collapsed mainline rail and waited. Don't remember for what. Maybe the end. Maybe rescue. Maybe a rat to eat. Whatever I'd believed, about the Emperor, about the Father below, about deliverance or purpose, it had evaporated in the heat. All I had now was skin blistered raw, beneath robes that stank of mold and smoke, and a head too cracked to tell dream from memory. The fire didn't come for me, not directly, just rolled past, disinterested. I wasn't a threat, wasn't worth purging. Some days that felt like mercy. Most days it felt worse. I tried saying the litany of endurance again. Got through 2 lines before realizing my mouth was just shaping the words. No sound, no breath left. The Emperor protects. Sure, protects the faithful, the strong, the unbroken. What does he do with the rest of us? The flinching, the ones who dropped the slab that killed 100 without knowing it? Torch vultures picked through the remains the next day, their servo tethers dragging behind them like iron entrails. I wondered if they recorded what was left of us. Maybe filed it. Subject, heretic. Disposition, terminated, irrelevant. Cult origin, unknown. Threat level, minimal. I sat hunched in a corner and dared one of them to tag me. It didn't. Just floated on, scouting for something more vital. A bit of Xenos proof, a stolen relic, a survivor with more limbs than allowed. Eventually, a thunderous voice echoed from above. Vox horns again. Ecclesiarch's sermons. Reinforcements broadcast faith like it was pesticide. They called it a baptism by fire. A sanctification of false flesh. Their words made as much sense as the cults had in the end. You ever listen to priests and hear the same pitches as a madman talking to himself in a sump pipe? I did. At some point, the promethium ran out. Or they decided enough was ash. I crawled from my bolt hole and looked around. The sky was thick with soot. Sunlight didn't reach the shelf I stood on, so the whole world was red-black and trembling. Not from quake or attack or machinery, just heat. I found a cracked mirror shard near what used to be Relay Station Gamma. Looked in it. Didn't know the face. Filthy. Eyes wrong. Expression like I'd missed a joke everyone else had been laughing at for weeks. I whispered a prayer, or tried to. Not to the Emperor, not to the Father below, just into the air. Anyone who might be listening, anyone who wasn't burning or blind. If I collapsed then and never got up, who would know? I walked till my legs forgot why. The manufactorum was gone. Just girders melted like wax and slag heaps hissing in the afterglow. No sign of the altar or the overseers or the cogitators. Just hush. Not silence, but hush. The kind that follows something big, when even the echoes don't want to speak. I laid down where the bolts used to hammer, felt the ash settling into the open weave of my robes, thought maybe the next wind would take what was left of me. Maybe that's the only form of freedom anyone gets down here. Smoke, ash, silence. The ash clings to everything. It makes no distinction. Flesh or steel, dead or something that only wishes it was. I took another step, or maybe I fell forward. Hard to tell. My legs don't feel like legs anymore. They're just things that used to move me where Overseer Grinlock pointed. Now they squeak and drag, metal on bone, a sound like chains through soot. Somewhere nearby, a reclaimer crawler rumbles past. I don't look up. Its treads spit bones. The manufactorum foundations are still there. Almost. Slag heaps where the tower once sat like a rusted god. The spirits of industry are gone. Or maybe they only ever lived in our heads. Wasn't that the Bishop of Sump Tier 4 who said, "The machine god dwells in the heartbeat of obedience"? I obeyed until the floor melted under my boots and my sister's scream turned to steam. That has to count for something. I find the frame of a servitor, still upright in one corner, frozen mid-task, arm locked over a melted conduit. The flesh has blackened over its jaw, lips shriveled to show metallic implants beneath. Even in death, it hasn't stopped working, though there's nothing left to fix. That's faith, I suppose. The pure kind. Not like mine. My hands are bloody again. Raw skin snagged open on wreckage I don't remember passing through. There's a piece of shim tubing still clutched in my fist. I stare at it long enough to hope it's something else. It's not. I loosen my fingers. The tube hits the ash with a squelch. One more relic for the rats and the winds. Something moves behind me, or above me. Servo skulls. Their lenses whine softly as they float in grid lines over the devastation, one after another like beads on a rosary, scanning, recording. No burial rites, no holy oils. Just silent red eyes etching data into cogitator memory. Sector 9BC cleansed. Estimated dead, 41,600. Estimated biomass yield, moderate. Estimated heretic presence, null. I guess that's us. Null. I taste blood. Could be mine. Could be something older soaking the dust. There was a boy once who asked me what the air tasted like down here. I told him if he held a rusty nail in his mouth and licked a dying battery, then took a lungful of sulfur, he'd get the idea. That was the funny thing about the young down-hivers. They were curious. No one ever explained to them that curiosity was just another kind of heresy. I try sitting. My knees fold wrong. One of them crunches. Doesn't matter. The world is gray. The sky, if it exists, is darker than I remember. A bruise wrapped in smoke. No birds, of course. Never were. But once we had moths. Strange glowing things that fed off mildew in the vents, their wings like broken lumen strips. Even they're gone. My throat is a collapsed pipe. I mouth a prayer to the Emperor, just to see if the words still come. They do, mostly. O guardian of mankind, let your light pierce the veil of shadow and... That's as far as I get before I huff back a cough that brings up something thick and bright. I let it drip from my chin. The prayer doesn't need finishing. He wasn't listening. Someone set up incense cones near the edge of the ruins. They burned out hours ago, but the scent hangs in the air, a sour sweetness masking rot. I recognize the mixture. New Promise Blend, they called it. Cheap fumes soaked into wax and lies. Breathing it made everything feel like it might change. I remember sitting in a crowd of huddled workers, that smoke curling through us, and for a moment, we believed there was something more than smog and steel. The next day, they pulled 4 of us into the administrator's pit and fed us to the Geffel units. A swipe of my hand clears a patch of soot off a fallen beam. Someone carved a symbol there. Not the cog of the Mechanicus, not the twin eagle. Something else. Something with too many limbs. I scratch at it with a broken pipe tube till the grooves vanish. Not because I believe it matters. Just habit. You used to scrub what you weren't allowed to understand. My sister's pendant is gone. I think it burned with the rest of her. I shouldn't have given away that power key. Or maybe I should have. The cult said we'd rise together, not die together. Funny, isn't it, how often those sound the same? Wind cuts through a broken corridor. It carries voices that aren't voices, more like mechanical echoes, recordings left on repeat maybe. One of them is a devotional chant, eye that sees you, throne that shields you. Another is just static. I lie back and let them wash over me like waves that don't care if you breathe. The ash settles faster now. I don't think days are passing anymore, just compressions of time, like the heavy ram cycles on the extrusion press. 1 minute cold, next minute colder. Your shoulder cracks, and then it's tomorrow. Once I dreamed about joining the Outer Rim labor crews, the ones who repair spire scaffolding near actual sunlight. Of course, that was before the sun turned orange from chim cloud concentration. They say the Emperor's light reaches even there. I wouldn't know. I've only ever seen lumen strips. Too many of them flicker now. The Vox Tower still echoes sometimes. Orders that aren't meant for anyone alive. Section H conform. Sector purge complete. Compliance index 13%. That last part always makes me smile. 13. A good number, I think. Unlucky enough that no one expects you to live long. Lucky enough that when you do, no one checks why. They'll come for me soon. Not soldiers. They're done. No, it'll be the robed ones. Magos biologis, maybe. Scanning for survivors, for vector traces, for neural anomalies. They'll jam a spiker into my spine, upload what's left of my memories, then flush my body into the conversion pool. Servitor grade, low cog function, high muscle yield, I'm not scared. They'll burn away the guilt, sandblast the choices. I'll serve again, in purest form. A meat flag placed on a production line. No dreams, no cults, no prayers, just oil. Still, some part of me waits for the moment when they plug in and see what I saw. The masks, the mutant laughter, the patriarch's shadow towering behind a flared vent. Will they purge the data? Will they believe me? Does it even matter? Far in the distance, fire flares skyward again. Another sector cleansed, another step toward collective penance. Someone gave the order, someone always does. Maybe that's what the Imperium is. One long line of people telling someone else to pull the trigger. The ash is warm underneath now. Either the crawler relays have reignited, or something's spreading beneath again. I wonder which side gets to claim that life first, the rot or the flame. I hear footfalls, not enforcers, not tech priests, softer, bare feet in soot, no boots, no steel. They walk over bone like it's cloth. I don't look, I don't move. Maybe they'll walk past, they don't. A hand touches my chest, light, like a whisper thinking about becoming sound. I stare up and see nothing, not even eyes, just lines on a face I can't count. A shape both too symmetrical and too human. They smile, or imitate it. I open my mouth to scream, or speak, or pray, but no words come. Ash fills my throat, and that maybe is mercy.